This episode of the Accounting Insiders podcast is brought to you by Insightful Accountants Be Insightful membership program. Get 9 expert-led training tracks, over 30 CPE hours a year, hands-on workshops, and year-round premium content to grow your skills and your practice. Learn more at blog.insightfulaccountant.com. Just click the premium member content button.
Okie doke, here we go. It's October the 15th, 2025. Who would do a webinar for tax and accounting people on the 15th? I guess Insightful Accountant and Kristen Nies Ciraldo would. So thank you all for being here. Kristen, thank you so much for being here as well. And we will see you very soon.
Thanks for having me. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kristen Nies Ciraldo, and we're going to get into it straight away because it is a half hour and it is tax day. So here we go. This presentation is called Accounting for Taste. And this is all about the special sides that kind of can be scary when it comes to restaurant clients and why you should do restaurant clients anyway, why you should offer those sides. So think about this. What is keeping you, if you had to consider, like if you are nervous about doing restaurants or you're not quite sure if it's something you want to do, or you've done a few and you're not quite sure you want to really lean in, what's keeping you from that? Thinking about your work style, what kinds of problems you like solving, your comfort with automation and all those things. What are the traits? What are the things that you feel you can really bring to the table in terms of your clients? What is keeping you from diving into the weird and wonderful world serving restaurants? Just keep that in mind. We're going to talk about 4 areas that people have vague notions about before they dive into this niche and have it sort of feel like it might be scary. This is a peek into tips and their lives beyond just the table that they're placed upon. The fuzzy world of special taxes, cash and the other transactions that become and cease to be cash, and the wonderful world of special delivery sales. So we're going to dive right into tips. Tips are truly the ghost of the financial world. They don't actually belong. I mean, they belong in our books, right? But they don't, they're a pass-through. So we shouldn't deal with them except for collecting them, then paying them back out. Unfortunately, when it comes to restaurants, they have to do a heck of a lot more than that. So they sort of haunt a lot of areas of the restaurant world. You never show up very concretely. Once you know how to catch them, however, tracking them can be a bit easier. They do tend to be something that people are a little bit leery of. So the first thing to know is that not all tips are really tips. Just because it gets left for the service staff doesn't mean it's actually a tip. These are 3 main ways tip data can change within even like when we collect it and then pay it out. If tips aren't voluntary, they aren't tips. It has to be voluntary. It has to be up to the person being served to leave it. It's considered a transaction between your client's customer and their people who gave them service. So if tips aren't voluntary, they aren't tips. Immediately, if they aren't voluntary, they aren't tips. They are wages, and they should be counted as wages with all that means. However, many restaurants pass on things like auto gratuity and service charges in full to their client or to their service staff. So even though they aren't tips, they kind of act like tips. Basically, there's a lot of ways that each individual restaurant can go, a lot of decisions that are sort of agreements that are made amongst the staff at a restaurant. So you may encounter one method one way and another method the next. In fact, I can guarantee you that there will be variations amongst every restaurant you handle. Most places split tips. It's left for service staff, not just the server. And most staff expect to split out. So you can't just attribute the tip to whoever rung up that sale. In some states, tips are actually supplements to minimum wage. Minimum wage might be as low as $2 and I think 15 cents or something like that. And what restaurant owners are told is, hey, you can pay your workers $2.15 as long as the tips they receive bring them up to the federal minimum wage or the state minimum wage. However, they're still tips. So there's all kinds of weirdness. They haunt all kinds of aspects of the restaurant books. However, it doesn't have to be scary, because once you know the decision points along the lines of the life of a tip or even a service charge, you can actually set up little traps for them and help them move along their way to the afterlife of living their lives with your customers, your clients' staff. So the usual setups. First of all, of course, determine whether something is a gratuity or a tip. Once that's determined, basically decision points follow these lines. What has been given over? Is it cash? Is it check? Is it a credit card tip? How customers choose to pay their tips makes a big difference into how you have to tax them, where you need to look for them, and even what the processes are on the ground in the restaurant of what happens next. For instance, a fine dining restaurant might have almost all credit card tips. That's going to be a very different situation with what happens next than maybe a walk-up that just has a jar with like $1 bills inside. Second, who gets that tip? How you track those tips? Where is it going? What's the split? How do they split it? How do they track who gets what? Do servers just pay out people directly and hope that they don't get taxed for the whole amount? Or is there some sort of organized system for a larger service staff? Does everyone split evenly? Or does a server sort of in charge of distributing the tips that they themselves got on their checks for their customers? It can be complicated. And then when is it paid to people? Is everyone given cash? Are those tips, credit card tips, magically turned into cash payouts at the end of the night? Or have people agreed to wait 2 weeks to get paid on their check? What about the people that are tipped out? Do they get their tips immediately, even though the server gets their tips later on, or vice versa? A lot of decision points inside a restaurant that a lot of might be determined by the level of the restaurant. How you track each of them branches out from there, depending on what form they take, who's meant to get it, and when it's paid to them. Now, all that is in advance of you even tracking $1 inside the books. There are a million ways to track depending on all those different decision points. But here is one thing you should never do. Never put tips on the main part of a P&L. Even auto gratuities that might come in and then get paid out. The reason is that people think, oh, if I add it to sales and I add it to expenses, it'll wash out. And it will wash out when it comes to the bottom line. There won't be any change on the bottom line. That's absolutely right. However, what won't be unaffected is your KPIs. So this is just an example. Here's what happens when tips are excluded from regular income and expenses. They're either on the balance sheet or down in other income and other expenses. We can see a great bottom line, and we have KPIs that are a certain way, as if the tips never happened, because technically they don't involve us, right? They don't involve our clients. When they're supposedly wash out, when the tips are added to, they end up being an income, and when they're paid out, they're in labor. Not only does labor go up, that you'd expect that, but cost of goods sold goes down. In addition, any other KPI that you compare to income is also going to go down. It's going to look like they're doing a lot better than they are because that income went up artificially. Even the labor who was like offset, you all of a sudden have this big chunk of change that is 100%. The cost on it is 100% rather than 30% labor. So your 30% labor has this huge chunk that's costed at quote unquote 100% because it's just a pass through. In addition, even if you isolate these things inside, if you give them their own little category, yeah, you're going to save labor from being high, but everything else is still going to be low because your tips are in sales. So the fact that it doesn't change the bottom line doesn't mean a hill of beans. It's going to mess up all your KPIs. So really, when tracking tips, even auto gratuities that are paid through, keep them in a place where you can still look at your sales independent of their influence. And finally, the trick to tracking tips well and to making them less scary is getting clients to accept their role, because without them, it's very, very difficult to do anything remotely useful with tips. The carrot in this situation is, hey, if they track their tips right, that's just more of a tip credit for them. It's a consolation prize. Yes, they have to pay payroll taxes on these monies that supposedly have nothing to do with them, which is a whole other weirdness that restaurants have to deal with. But the silver lining to that is they get a tip tax credit. They get credit for the Social Security and Medicare they pay on those tips when they get taxed through the payroll. The stick is an audit. If a restaurant gets audited for not reporting all their tips, they get distributed amongst all the employees. So not only does the restaurant get audited, all those employees end up having to redo taxes for those years. And usually those tips are allocated by the number of hours those employees have worked. So truly, the best way to make this less scary is to impress upon clients and even your clients' employees that this can be a scary situation and that the math is clear. It's not that hard to figure out when tips aren't aren't being taxed. In fact, Form 8027 is literally us doing a little mini audit for the IRS to let them know whether or not they should audit our clients. So truly, just it's a whole thing, but just trust me, a lot of people just think they need to pay only on 8%. It's a whole misunderstanding that we as accountants can be instrumental in clearing up for clients. That makes this an opportunity to be helpful rather than something that's scary. You can purge their house of these hauntings of tips, these specters of tips. Number 2, taxes. This is something like the special taxes, right? This is something that's not really even concrete. I feel like it's something that people assume might be going on. Maybe like there's this idea that there's something complicated and they just don't know about it. And it'll be hard. And therefore, they just don't even want to look under the bed. It's going to be weird. It's going to be hard. It's very unknown. It's going to be super smelly and complicated and high maintenance. When really the special things for restaurants, they might not be the same as the special things for other industries, but they are similarly complicated. Every industry has those special somethings that they have to do. It's just a matter of knowing it and, quite frankly, training up the books to deal with them. So what are the kind of tax types that typically run in restaurants? Well, of course, there's sales tax, and that, that a lot of industries are affected by that. To make things even more weird, sometimes sales tax doesn't apply to certain restaurant sales. It just depends on the state. So that's real fun. Use tax. Did someone buy something and then use it in comping out or giving employee meals? They didn't pay sales tax on it because they were going to resell it, but then for whatever reason, they didn't resell it. This is very different from discounting it. We're talking about, did they give it away or use it in-house? And finally, the morass that is tip taxing. Here's some more extras that people find scary, that they have vague notions of why it might be complicated. Special taxes, like some cities tax liquor sales or alcohol sales. Some tax, hey, you pay, you have a jukebox, or maybe it's a bar that has live music and there's DJs and bouncers and entertainment, and maybe there's catering, so there's special licenses and property tax, workers' comp audits, rent audits, insurance audits, and estimated payments for S corps. A lot of things, if you think about it, they go on with other industries too. It's just that we have this preconceived notion that restaurants are going to be hard. So we assume that dealing with these things might be hard. It might be larger numbers, it might be more variables. But once things are set up, it's doubtful it'll be extra hard or harder than it would be in any other industry. So the bottom line is, when it comes to taxes, setups rule, and the setup should rule. Focus on structure, keep separate what your variables are, and automate what you can. That's the long and short of it. Next up, we've got cash. This is like the Walking Dead of restaurant variables. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, every once in a while, someone is going to have to go down the street and pick up some lemons, right? But as soon as that happens, if you don't have a process, then all of a sudden there's 50 receipts, they multiply in the drawer, everything's infected, you don't know where the cash went. It's a contagious bank, right? Petty cash can be a contagious bank unless you have a system, because the system and checking in on the system sort of prevents people from abusing the system. There are a lot of cash ins, like advance repays, sale down the street of, hey, we have extra steaks and the restaurant down the street needs it. Or, hey, one of the employees wants to buy some wine. The daily cash that comes in, we forget, especially if you're doing the horrible thing of booking sales based on deposits. That cash just disappears. You're only looking at credit cards. Accounts receivable payments, like maybe you receive a check for catering. Cash out, there are a million things. I mean, these are just some of the big ones. The more your client indulges in random cash transactions, the more likely random cash transactions will appear unknown to everyone. So the best thing you can do when it comes to tracking cash is just approach it like a zombie horde. Stay on top of it, regular patrols, right? Reconcile regularly, cordon off sections of dates where it's like, this is reconciled, I know this is all accounted for, let's throw those receipts away, let's get them out of the safe. Make it easy for your clients to knock off some of those random zombie expenses that they go out and do by having something on their phone where they can take a picture of a receipt and submit it, and then just mark the receipt submitted. If they're doing it in the moment, they're already dealing with money. They're literally paying. Making it easy for them to report it keeps everyone more happy. And finally, book sales daily. It means you can track the changes in cash on a daily basis. You'll know, oh, this day, the net cash was $50. The next day, it was negative 30. We should have $20 between those 2 days. Finally, alternative sales. These are the sales that aren't really like, they're not through the POS usually. They're catering and that kind of stuff. But I think the one that people fear the most is like the dreaded delivery sort of app. And I think people, even out of the restaurant niche, have a sense that this can be horrific, just in dealing with it and just all over the place. The truth is that some sales really aren't great for anyone. Why? The fees can be truly predatory sometimes. The labor can mushroom, and the math, like actually reconciling stuff for us, can just be, it can be endless. How do you deal with this? Well, first of all, you have to help your clients rein in what is actually a valuable sale. I like to say, don't do delivery apps to make money. Do delivery apps to make even more money. Meaning, if you don't have your basic expenses covered by your regular in-house sales, delivery apps aren't worth it, because you are trying to use something that only might have a 70% cost behind it, or like even 80 or 90% cost behind it once you factor in labor and all those fees, and trying to make that pay your rent and your electricity. However, if you've already covered all those things with in-house sales and you have labor standing there doing nothing, it's great. Like, hey, if you got time to lean, you got time to make some fries and stick them in a bag so this guy can pick them up. It's a quick $20, right? And you already were paying for the labor and you've already paid the rent. So it's free money. How do you do that? How do you help your clients optimize these services and keep them from turning into vampires, basically? Profit vampires. First of all, you have to know what times it's most beneficial for you. Your clients have to know what times it's most beneficial for them to turn that delivery option on. Some of these delivery apps allow you to sort of opt out during really busy times, which means you don't necessarily have to have extra labor. They can truly do what they're meant to do, which is fill in those gaps when labor isn't that busy. They have to be there, but they're not, full up with work. Number two, know what your break even is for the client. That way they know if they're covering those fixed expenses. If they're not, then those delivery apps look a lot less attractive than maybe starting to do catering or adding in happy hour. It's much more cost effective. And number three, none of this stuff matters if your client and you can't discuss it clearly. So have a structure where you can see this stuff on its own. That means tracking delivery separately and being sure to break out those fees from other credit card fees. The point, once again, is to keep these monsters contained in their own special sections, keep them isolated so they don't infect others, and keep things automated as much as you can. In other words, keep separate what is complicated so you can deal with it on its own and more clearly, and keep it automated so you can keep things standard and up to date. So, given all this, what is keeping you from doing restaurants? If it is the ability to be automated, if the ability to be automated sounds good to you, if monthly true-up's better than one big calculation sounds good to you, if you like helping clients with processes rather than doing processing yourself, if you're willing to compromise on whatever works rather than being married to your own sort of way of doing things, and if you're more interested in guiding your clients than babysitting or monitoring your clients, these scary, scary monsters are very, very tameable. And they're actually no more scary than you'd find in any other industry. It's just a matter of getting familiar, making friends with the nightmare. So this is a final permission slip. If you are the kind of person who thinks that you can't do restaurants, that you're afraid to try it due to lack of experience, stop it. You know more than you think you do. I promise you, you know more about restaurants than you do about dentists or nonprofits or marketing agencies or lawyers. Most of you have been in restaurants more than you have been to any of those places. And plus, these people need conscientious people who actually care that they're giving a good product. So you can do this. Here's a little extra unpoll. Which I would love to know which of these learning opportunities might interest you. If you can put it in the chat, that would be great. I've done some extra stuff in addition to this series. I also have a course on Alicia's RoyalWise platform on how to set up restaurants in QBO. It dives in deeper to a lot of these things. In fact, some of these slides I sort of borrowed from that learning, that course. And she's running a sale right now. It's great. Love to answer questions if you guys have any. In your deck, there will be links to all the previous webinars as well as a QR code to get a chart of accounts. And that is it.
Yeah, we do have few questions on the list, Kristen. So first is from Ida Walt. So first is, what restaurant apps do you recommend and what outside delivery apps recommended?
So delivery apps really do depend on where a person is in the country, what their type of restaurant are and stuff like that. Those are the delivery platforms like ChowHound, like Chow Now, Uber Eats, all those things. It really does depend on the restaurant. But as far as apps that can help with that, Chowly is a great option. It can corral, if you have a client that has 2 or more delivery apps, this thing can corral all those delivery apps, because one of the downsides of reconciling delivery apps is they all have a different process. All those platforms have a different process. And Charlie makes those kinds of reconciliations a little bit easier. I also, they asked what kind of restaurant apps do I recommend? Oh gosh, there is a lot. What I will say is every restaurant's different. However, getting clients out of their spreadsheets and into automations in a way where they can see a free up of their time paves the way for all the automations you might want going forward. So leaning into things like automating inventory or cost of goods sold, things they might be trying to do on their little Excel sheets in their greasy kitchen computers. Those are things. Also, whatever you give them to interact with, make it doable on the phone. They don't sit down, except for like once a week. That's not, they're busy. How did I get my first restaurant client? I actually worked in restaurants before I was an accountant. I learned accounting through restaurants. So I got my first restaurant client when I was in grad school. Just, they figured out I knew how to do math and they were a crazy restaurant. They brought me into the office and I learned from there. Yes, the slide deck will be available to anyone who would like it. Anyone who uses that QR code, I will forward you the slide deck and also a chart of accounts for restaurants. It focuses on the P&L, but there's a lot of sort of structural tips in there. What is the average monthly bookkeeping fee and their size? It really does depend. Think about the different sizes of restaurants. That's how much variation there is. Chowly is the app. CHOWLY is the app.
Are you an accounting or tax professional who wants to stay ahead without spending a dime? Join thousands who trust insightful accountant and tax practice news to keep them informed and empowered. Get expert updates on QuickBooks, Xero, tax planning strategies, and workflow tips delivered straight to your inbox. Whether you're a solo bookkeeper, firm leader, or tax advisor, these newsletters are your shortcut to what's next in the profession. They're free, practical, and built for people like you. Visit insightfulaccountant.com and hit subscribe to start your smarter workflow today for free.